I was bald. One of my favorite teases my dad and I do each other here and there. No, I'm not. I was bald. There's a little doink on the nose right there. The beard. Definitely that scene in general, because I look back at the blooper reel. I don't know how many... I would like to know how many takes they did of that scene where Elaine threw the toupee out the window. Because I'm pretty sure... I mean, you only see just one, and when George was running to the door, and the toupee just fell off his head, and Elaine's reaching for it, and George's like, wait, what? No, no! And there's no toupee there, or whatnot. But it was still a good episode. I mean, I more so remember this episode solely for that. But of course, there's, Elaine trying to pull what Kramer did, which, by the way, in case if you missed the highlights of the 100 part 1, I completely forgot there was a relationship reference to the smelly car. Like, what happened to the smelly car? But I forgot it's the episode where Kramer fell in love with Susan's girlfriend Mona, and Mona had never liked a man in her life, like, attracted to a man like that before. She only been attracted to women. In this one, Elaine tried to convert a man to be straight. Even though, again, it's kind of like, it's kind of back in the Switch when Jerry and George tried to pull off the impossible. Elaine tried to pull off an impossible, which briefly worked, but then didn't last too long. Of course, didn't last too long in the episode, and just didn't feel like it lasted long in general. It was like a 1 or 2 day thing, it felt like. Or quicker than that, who knows, I don't know. But let's talk about the beard. Of course, what is a beard? That was the exact definition I wanted to look up. What is a beard? Besides, the thing on your face that I absolutely refuse to grow because beards are not my thing. But a beard is a person who carries out a transaction, typically a bet. I don't think this was a bet in this one, for someone else in order to conceal the other's identity. So, in this episode, first off, the main storyline, of course, was kind of like a follow-up of George at the end of the scofflaw getting himself a toupee and just relishing in it. But, of course, everybody's trying to get George to, George still doesn't want to cover up the fact people who don't know him don't know that he's bald. But he's not going to tell them that he's actually bald. Elaine, of course, thinks that George looks ridiculous with the wig on him. Jerry is just playing along. And Kramer, though, is all for, having, George, stand out his new look. The fact that he wants to set him up with a woman he hasn't seen in years that he knows is in the area. He hasn't seen her for a while and he has no picture. So he has a plan as to show George what she looks like before George actually meets her. We'll get to that in a second. Elaine, though, has tickets to go see a ballet. And she's going with a friend of a friend, I think it is, who knows this banker guy. They have box office seats at the Met, and she was invited to see Swan Lake, but he's afraid. But the guy that she's going to be going with is gay, and of course he's afraid his boss can't handle his orientation. So to make the boss more comfortable, she's going as his date. So basically, she's going to help, one, make the boss feel more comfortable, and also to conceal Robert's identity. The guy's name was Robert. Elaine does go, and, she posed, she held hands, she did, all sorts of things, and she even kissed him. But obviously, it was revealed in a later scene, she actually likes Robert. The problem, though, is Robert doesn't swing that way. So Elaine is going to attempt to turn him. Will she succeed? Just like back in the Switch. Will Jerry succeed with the switch? The switch? The switch. Can't be done. I wonder. Meanwhile, though, Kramer's idea for a photo, to come up with some type of a photo of an image of what this woman looks like, whose name was Denise, I believe it was. You know, back when I did the switch, maybe this is what I was thinking of when I saw Denise, because because when I did the first take of the switch, I was calling Sandy, the non-laugher, I was calling her Denise, but this Denise I must have been thinking of maybe when that or not. So Kramer says that the idea he has is to go see, he has a buddy who's a sketch artist at the police station. So he goes and describes, the sketch artist, and basically George is flattered by what he sees, thinks she looks beautiful. Jerry, though, meanwhile, for some reason, catches the eye of Sergeant Kathy Tierney, who apparently her character Tierney, that name came from the name of the actor who played Alton Bennis all the way back in the Jacket episode, Lawrence Tierney. That's where that name came from, apparently. So Jerry took an interest in her. So one day he was hanging out with her, and apparently they were talking about like the lie detector, and I forgot why, but Kathy asked Jerry if he ever seen Melrose Place, which Jerry denies. But Kathy thinks he's lying. So then she says she's going to put him on the lie detector, which is ridiculous, but it's funny because it's a show that, Jerry's embarrassed to admit that he's into, but they make it funny, even funnier because how he reacts to it. And of course, Elaine, talks to him about it, like, all this time we could have been talking about Michael and Billy and Kimberly or whatever the names of the characters were. But of course, Jerry was embarrassed to admit that he likes Melrose Place. Also, a story I haven't mentioned yet, but Kramer was giving this homeless man some food and some stuff to help him out with. But things went sour with their bond whenever the guy refused to give Kramer back the Tupperware that he had used to give him some Chinese at the beginning of the episode. Kramer was also making a couple bucks, being a stand-in for the what do you call it? Basically standing in for as a suspect whenever they bring in a suspect. What's it called? When they bring in a victim trying to identify the criminal is involved in their crime. Kramer came in and posed as one. He was in the line. Of course, eventually at the end of the episode, they brought in the homeless man who was a witness of like a jewel thief. But of course, the only person that he recognized was Kramer, and of course, him and Kramer had a bit of a grudge going. He also had gotten George's toupee after a scene which we'll get to that now. Well, fast forward. That same scene where Jerry and Elaine were discussing Melrose Place, George had gone to meet Denise, only to find out that she is bald herself. We don't see her on camera, but she was bald too. In which George was infuriated that Kramer set him up with a bald woman. And of course Elaine's like, you realize what you're doing there? You're rejecting her because she's bald. It's like, so? And Elaine goes, you're bald! And then George goes, once again, no, I'm not. I was bald. And then Elaine gets sick of it. She thinks that George is like an idiot and is that like a big fool himself. So Elaine chases down George as George tries to escape the apartment, grabs the toupee, and says, I don't like this thing. And here's what I'm doing with it. Chucks it out the window. George reaches out the window to grab it, but as soon as he reaches out, the blind falls right on his back. And then the homeless man, again, that Kramer was buddies with, found a toupee, and he picked it up, and he went walking off with it. But, of course, George seemed to be okay again with, being himself again, being a bald again. And he thought, you know what? He was going to go on another date with the bald girl. The scalp was clean, said some positives about it. Of course, Jerry, though, needs help, though, because he still doesn't want Kathy to know that he likes Melrose Place. So he thinking George is the best liar, even though in the last in the Scofflaw, all although George is good with lying, he's terrible at keeping a secret, and he was terrible at lying the fact that something was bothering him when he knew that Gary Fogle didn't really have cancer. But of course, before Jerry left the coffee shop, the only piece of advice George could give him was, Jerry, remember, it's not a lie if you believe it. So then, of course, also that night, the night before, Elaine went out again with Robert and the boss's wife. They had a good time again, and then Elaine asks Robert if they can go upstairs. Robert catches on immediately, realizes what she's trying to do here, and Elaine was like, I thought maybe you'd be interested in maybe changing teams. He goes, but I'm a starting shortstop. And Elaine goes, but Robert, we need a shortstop real bad. And as the next day, as Jerry was heading off to the police station, do the whole lie detector thing, he runs into Elaine, who said she succeeded. She turned him because she's a woman. Ba-ba-bum. And they had said something earlier when they were talking in the scene with Jerry and Elaine about having access to the equipment. Basically, trying to, keep Robert from, going back to, that team, but being on her team. But of course, that didn't last too long. First, Jerry, of course, went to do the lie detector, and of course, the pen was waving like crazy. He finally just snapped and just obviously did a big rant about one of the scenes in Melrose Place, and obviously he was busted for which was no big deal, the fact that he watched Melrose Place. And then, of course, Elaine lucked out. The shopping and the sex, were kind of a thing with her and Robert. But then he went back, basically saying how she felt that she only had access to the equipment for so long, when Robert had more time to, go back to the other side, which, of course, unfortunately happened. Robert went back. But there's always room for Elaine on their team. Of course, she was bummed about it, but, she tried. George came in, though, of course, and he was bummed because the bald woman rejected him, saying that he wasn't her type. And then, of course, Kramer came in at the same time and said how George blew it because how he, didn't keep his identity with, the wig, and said how he blew it. And then Melrose Place came on. The four of them started watching. Of course, it ends with, I hate that Michael. Obviously showing that Jerry was really into the show and able to show that in front of his friends. And that's the beard. That's, again, the whole bald George and the toupee was definitely my favorite storyline. The rest of it, again, was good. But again, when I think of this episode, that's the first thing I think of is George and the toupee, and the whole scene where Elaine, ripped the toupee off his head and threw it out the window, which is one scene that I wonder how on earth they got through. Of course, in 2 episodes, there's a scene where Jason Alexander admitted he just could not get through, which is like an improv scene at the end, which we'll talk about that in a few moments. Again, a couple little topics, a little trivia again. Officer Tierney, who Jerry dated, is named after the actor who played Elaine's dad, Alton Bennis, in The Jacket, Lawrence Tierney. And of course, an interesting thing of irony, Catherine Lanassa, who played Officer Tierney, eventually would marry Melrose Place star Grant Show 17 years after this Seinfeld episode aired. And also she married, she's also been married to French Stewart as well, who I didn't realize was the movie theater worker who told Elaine about Jake Jarmel's accent. Of course, French Stewart, the only 2 things I know about French Stewart was he was Inspector Gadget 2, and he was also Marv Merchants in Home Alone 4. Not a good movie, by the way. And then, of course, that's pretty much it. So, guys, that's the beard. In the next episode, we kiss hello. What's that episode all about? It's pretty obvious. But we'll talk about that episode next. So guys, what were your thoughts on the beard? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. And be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. And follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAirboy93. Till then guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you all later in the Kiss Hello. Have a great night guys. Peace out everybody.